Open the podcast bay door as hell.
Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 74 of Welcome to Geek Town. I'm your host, Kurt Onstead. I've been a proud geek all my life, being into role-playing games, board games, sci-fi, fantasy, and especially superheroes and comics. And I want to help others join me in those pursuits, but I found that sometimes people can get overwhelmed or feel left out because they don't already have what some consider the requisite knowledge to be considered a fan. And that's where Welcome to Geek Town comes in. Here, you can ask your questions without feeling like a gatekeeper is calling you out for not yet being fully versed in every aspect of your new interest. Before the end of the month, and the year, I want to once again thank my loyal patrons for helping to keep this show running. Ricky Garvin, Aaron Borst, Matthew Saint, Lyndon Onstead, Rob Garrison, Carla Hoffman, Utuk Zul, Julio Herrera, and Forrest Woodward continue to support the show, and I am so grateful for this. If you'd like to add your support, you can do so for just $1 per month over at patreon.com/welcome to Geektown, and as a thank you, you'll be able to read full scripts of the shows, listen to outtakes, as well as get this monthly shoutout. Before we get started on this week's topic, we have some feedback from a listener. Dr. J is slowly catching up and just wrote in regarding episode 46, where I answered a few different questions. In that episode, I gave my own definition of comics, which was, quote, any combination of pictures and text that is designed to be read or looked at in a certain sequence to tell a story or explain a concept. The good doctor responded, saying, this strikes me as either too broad or too limiting, and I'm not sure which direction you mean. If, as you say, it includes IKEA instructions, sequential images with no text, would it not also include the converse, sequential text with no images? Like, well, books? If your definition requires both images and text, doesn't that exclude one of my favorites, Gone, which has no words outside the front cover? For those unaware, Gone is a manga, Japanese comic, with gorgeous art that follows a tiny T-Rex-like dinosaur as he wanders around various wilderness locations and encounters modern-day animals. None of the animals speak, instead acting pretty much like the actual creatures they are, and so there's no dialogue, not even captions. As Dr. J says, the entire story is wordless. And by my definition, that is still definitely comics, as it is a combination of pictures used to tell a story. When I wrote my definition, I was trying to be as inclusive as possible. But as pointed out, if you take it literally, it could be that I'm including pure prose novels with that definition. To be more specific, I should have said, any combination of pictures, and possibly text, that is designed to be read or looked at in a certain sequence to tell a story or explain a concept. Hopefully that clears that up, and I hope Dr. J eventually reaches this episode to hear my response. Now that all that prelim is out of the way, let's get to the actual topic for this week. Seeing as this episode drops on Christmas Eve, I wanted to do an episode that related to the season. I started thinking about the various comic book stories involving Santa, especially in the Marvel and DC universe, and decided to go over those particular issues to see how Father Christmas mixes in with a world of superheroes. Because there are so many tales to cover, this year I'll be talking about DC Comics with St. Nicholas, and then maybe next year I can discuss Marvel's entries. a few of the things I'll be talking about could be considered to be pulling back the curtain on the secrets of Kris Kringle. So if you're listening with your kids, you may want to wait until later to finish this episode. And if you're one of my younger listeners, perhaps you should skip this episode until a few years from now. Yes, Lily, I'm talking to you. Okay, now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's get going. The very first appearance of Santa in a DC book is 1940, just 2 years after Superman's first published book, in a one-shot titled Superman's Christmas Adventure. A lot of story is packed into this 16-page adventure, and for a modern audience, this comes across as more than a little disjointed and overly compressed, but it still has a lot of fun to it. The issue starts with Lois and Clark on the lookout for a story while also Christmas shopping. They talk to a boy looking through the store window whose parents can't afford to get him any toys, which inspires Clark to suggest the Daily Planet do a toy drive. Unlike modern-day toy drives, he suggests people donate old toys, which will be repaired before distributing them to underprivileged kids. Just a couple of panels later, we see a spoiled young boy named James throw a toy train at his butler, because he has too many toys and wants something better, like a yacht. A display that Superman sees by randomly looking through the wall with his X-ray vision. That night, Superman takes the boy out on a flight to see the less fortunate children who only have one or even no toys, which teaches the young boy gratitude. Finally, we reach the main plot of the story. 2 businessmen, named Dr. Grouch and Mr. Meanie, yes, really, land their plane at the North Pole in order to talk Santa Claus out of giving gifts, but instead using the incredible output of the elves' work to create products that can be sold. Santa and his helpers quickly kick the 2 Scrooges out, but the pair refuse to give up so quickly, deciding to show they mean business by destroying the Daily Planet's toy drive. They storm in, wearing masks to hide their identities, though Lois quickly tears off one mask and recognizes Dr. Grouch, and knock out Lois and Clark with stun gas. Of course, Clark only pretends. Before starting a fire and running off. Once they leave, Clark uses his super breath to quickly put out the blaze. Discovering they failed, Dr. Grouch and Mr. Meanie decide to fly back to the North Pole and destroy the toys at Santa's workshop. Santa is able to fend off their attack by activating the toy soldiers, who fight back and force the villainous duo to retreat. However, the pair discover Lois had stowed away in their ship and kidnap her, as well as taking Santa's reindeer. Superman is able to find and rescue the reindeer, but before he can take them back, Meanie uses his stun gas to knock them out, making Santa's Christmas flight impossible. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Superman volunteers his service and carries Santa and all his gifts around the world, so that Christmas is saved. While on this flight, Santa delivers gifts to Grouch and Meanie. Superman had caught Meanie during the reindeer rescue, but dropped him off back at his house instead of taking him to the police. And this act of generosity causes the old men to repent their evil ways, apologize to Santa and Superman, and release Lois. I should mention that in the middle of all of this, Lois is tied to a rocket that is fired off, she's rescued by Superman, and then recaptured by the villains after she was left on a roof. With the main plot wrapped up, in the final 2 panels, we come back to Lois and Clark walking down the street to find James, the spoiled young boy from the beginning of the story, who has wrapped up many of his old toys as he and his butler are out to deliver them to needy kids. And with a wink to the reader, Soups reminds kids of the joy of giving. With this summary, I think you can see what I meant when I said this feels disjointed and compressed for a modern audience. Things like Lois getting rescued and recaptured happen within less than a page of each other, and the A and B plots never interact or tie into each other at all. I could see a modern retelling of this where James is the one who teaches Grouch and Meanie the spirit of Christmas, rather than a gift from Santa. The pair say they've never gotten a gift before, which makes you wonder why Santa skipped them every year until this one. But still, if you have an extra couple of bucks, you can read this story on your Kindle, and it's an interesting artifact from the golden age of comics. This was originally a special promotional book that was produced in conjunction with various stores, including Macy's, and was a giveaway only available to customers of the stores involved. Special titles like this that are not available on the newsstand, or later in comic book stores, usually don't count in terms of continuity, so it wasn't until 6 years later that we get our first true canon tale of Superman and Santa teaming up. Action Comics number 105 has a cover date of February 1947, which means it came out in December 1946. Cover dates were used to tell the newsstands when to take the books off the shelf rather than being the publication date. In this team-up between the two, Superman once again has to save Christmas from a holiday-hating Grinch. This time, it is a millionaire named Jasper Rasper. The villain of the story uses a chemical his company's scientists have discovered in order to dose Santa with chocolates that make his already rotund belly even bigger, to the point where Santa can no longer fit down chimneys to make his Christmas deliveries. Superman arrives too late to prevent this, but is able to put Santa on a quick weight loss program, mostly through scares that sweat the pounds away. Not a recommended diet/exercise plan. Bringing him back down to his normal size in the nick of time. Would that be the Saint nick of time? Sorry. However, the pair then find that the reindeer were similarly dosed and are too large to pull Santa's sleigh. Of course, Superman is more than able to fill in for Donner, Blitzen, and the rest, and he flies Santa and his sleigh around the world. A moment we also saw in the earlier 1940 story. Another commonality between the two stories is that the villains of each tale see the error of their ways by the end. Similar, of course, to Scrooge's turnaround by the end of the famous Dickens tale. Jasper gives up his evil ways after being saved by Superman when his helicopter crashes in the Arctic, and explaining that even though Jasper was in the wrong to do what he did, Superman still believes in doing the right thing by not letting him freeze to death. This selflessness inspires Rasper to repent. That is not the case for our next Christmas tale, where the villain felt no such remorse. This 1984 story takes place in issue number 67 of DC Comics Presents, which was mainly a team-up book for Superman and various other heroes. The pairing in this case, obviously, is the Man of Steel and Saint Nick. The issue starts with Superman finding a young boy named Timmy sticking up a sidewalk Santa with a toy gun. Supes quickly realizes the boy has been hypnotized to do this, and takes him back to the Fortress of Solitude, to first release him from his stupor, then re-hypnotize him to discover who was behind this. It turns out Toyman, aka Winslow Schott, is the culprit, and Superman flies off, taking the young boy back towards civilization. However, a second trap goes off that the boy was unwittingly carrying, with a heavy gravity beam forcing Superman to crash down, still near the North Pole. Of course, this is where Santa comes into the story, with his elves rescuing Superman and Timmy. Superman, still recovering from the heavy gravity beam, tracks down Schott back to his factory, where a veritable army of toys fight the Man of Steel, but Santa sends his own toys in to assist Superman in the brawl, allowing Supes to take out Toyman. The issue ends with a, "It was all a dream," or was it? Ending, as Superman wakes up back in the Arctic with Timmy, having just crashed. He believes his time in the North Pole and afterwards to be simply a hallucination he had while unconscious, until he returns home to change back into his civilian clothes and discovers in his cape pouch, where he keeps his clothes, a Kryptonian toy he had had as a baby that he had mentioned to Santa during his recuperation. The next Santa story also has a framing device that presents it as possibly not taking place in continuity, but it has also been referenced in later stories that definitely are canon, or were before the most recent reboot, so I have to at least mention it. This one is definitely not for kids, however, as it stars the intergalactic bounty hunter Lobo. In this story, titled Lobo's Paramilitary Christmas Special, the main man, as Lobo often refers to himself, is hired by the Easter Bunny to take out Santa Claus, who is presented as Kris Crusher Kringle, a machete-wielding taskmaster who runs his operation with an iron fist, keeping the elves as slaves. Lobo, of course, being who he is, takes the job, and after mowing down basically the entire elf population, then gets into a one-on-one knife fight with Kringle and decapitates him. The over-the-top ultra-violence depicted in the story, as well as most of Lobo's appearances, isn't my personal cup of tea, but as I understand it, for those who do like that sort of thing, this is one of the better stories in that vein. Finally, we have a story that doesn't star Santa Claus, but does have an analog of one of his historical inspirations, so I think it fits. The 2019 anthology title, New Year's Evil, featured holiday stories starring various villains. In this case, the relevant tale stars Black Adam, a Shazam villain I discuss in episodes 26 and 52. Black Adam rules the country of Kahndaq with an iron fist, but always in what he feels are the best interests of his people. And so, when he discovers a young girl crying by herself, he inquires to find out what is causing her tears. This conversation cuts back and forth between Black Adam invading a hidden fortress in the North Pole sometime later, fighting various trolls and elves to get to a portal that takes them to the ancient city of Myra. Meanwhile, the girl explains that she's afraid that Santa will not be able to get to Kahndaq, possibly because of Adam's strict policy against outsiders, although the exact reason she feels this way isn't explained. Finally, in the fight scene, Adam reaches his destination to find the wizard known as Nicholas of Myra, whom he fights and defeats. The historical Saint Nicholas lived in the city of Myra in the Byzantine Empire in the late 3rd/early 4th century. The superpowered monarch points to a map and basically says, "Here's where my country is. I expect you to deliver gifts to everyone there, but I understand that a lump of coal is all I will get." While at the same time we see the young girl back at her house, setting up milk and cookies for Santa's arrival. It's a well-told little story that shows Black Adam's dark determination to do what is best for his citizens, even if it paints him as a villain in the world's eyes. Those are all the appearances I found of Santa or a Santa-like figure in DC, not counting mall Santas or other people wearing Santa's costume. If you think I missed one, be sure to let me know. And as a reminder, while I can continue to come up with topics on my own, I prefer to be answering questions from my listeners, so please send those in, or any comments on the show in general, via email to welcome2geektown, all spelled out, @gmail.com. Or you can go to welcome2, the number 2 in this case, geektown.com, and click the Submit a Question link if you'd prefer to remain anonymous. Other contact options include facebook.com/welcome-to-geektown or Twitter @geektownpodcast. Also, if you'd like to support the show directly, come join the Patreon at patreon.com/welcome-to-geektown for just $1 per month to get access to full scripts of the shows, outtakes, and a monthly shoutout. You can also help the show grow by subscribing and giving a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts to join the Geektown City Council, which helps other people find the show, so we can all tell them, "Welcome to Geektown, population, us." Welcome to Geektown is written, narrated, edited, and produced by me, Kurt Onstead. Theme music is by Aaron Levitz. Logo art by Archie Santana. All other sound clips are the copyrighted material of their respective owners, and no infringement is intended, falling under fair use.